Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Great to be with you on this Wednesday. We'll get to Tommy McCarthy in a moment. Okay. And Mike Rhoades will be the next head basketball coach at Penn State. It looks to be a 7-year deal. He is meeting with his Virginia Commonwealth team in about 45 minutes. He is scheduled to meet with his Virginia Commonwealth team at 4 o'clock. The Penn State Board of Trustees Compensation Committee is expected to meet at 4:30 to ratify this 7-year contract. And we'll talk more with John Sauber about Mike moving back to Pennsylvania. But it's, look, this is not an easy decision for him. I mean, he spent a lot of time in his career at Virginia Commonwealth. He was an assistant coach, an associate head coach. He was part of the Final Four coaching staff with Shaka Smart. He went to Rice. In his third year, he wins 23 games at Rice, which I'm telling you right now is nothing short of a miracle. I mean, that is the equivalent back in the, late 80s, early 90s when Steve Spurrier got duked to a bowl game, which is remarkable. He is a pros pro. He has taken VCU to the NCAA Tournament 3 of the last 4 years, but it also has been home to him. It also has been home to him and to Jody and to the 3 children along the way. So this would, I mean, we can talk about him being a Pennsylvania guy. We know about his father, James Rhoades, the state senator, and out of Schuylkill County and Mahanoy City. I understand that. But there is another point in life where you establish another home. I mean, I grew up in New England, but State College is my home. This is going to be, obviously, a you're in a position now. 5 years ago, you would have been in deep trouble in taking a job where everybody was in the transfer portal. Now, not everybody is, but it seems like it's getting close to that. All right? But because of the transfer portal, you can stay afloat. That's a big difference. And you're also, let's face it, I mean, let's be honest about it. It's also the possibility in this new era where you can get some of your current players, if they so desire, they have the ability to follow you if they want. Doesn't mean they will, but they have the ability. I've always said for years, and I am not a proponent of Rich Rodriguez. Please don't even start to, don't try to go further than people realize. But I always felt he would have had a better shot at Michigan if the current rules were in place and would have allowed his quarterback at West Virginia, Pat White, who ran the offense at West Virginia exactly the way Rich Rodriguez wanted to. If he'd been allowed to transfer to Michigan and play right away, it would have given Rich Rodriguez a better shot of greater than 3 years of longevity in Ann Arbor. Instead, he goes to Michigan, and his quarterback is Ryan Mallett, who in no way on the planet can run the offense he wants to run. Well, the rules are different now. The rules are different. And I'm not saying they're getting to a tournament. Look, we have to watch this entire process play out. But they've hired a pros pro, right? They've hired a pros pro. I had, personally, and I kept all this to myself, I had one internal candidate and I had one external candidate. I think everybody knows the internal candidate. That if they went internally, which direction I was thinking, okay, if they were going to go internally, okay, obviously Adam. If they were going to go externally, my thought was Mike would be the kind of guy they needed to get. There are other names mentioned, but every time I saw Mike Rhoades' name, I kept thinking to myself, this is the kind of guy that would have staying power here, does understand the state in a lot of ways, and, look, has been successful. He's been successful. And it looks like, according to reports, it's going to be a 7-year deal. Now, at Temple, John Rothstein's reporting that Charlton Young has withdrawn his name from consideration. And the reason is Temple has a lot of uncertainty right now. The university president resigned yesterday. All right, we have a lot to talk about on the show today. We'll deviate for a moment. Then we'll get to John Sauber, and we'll get back on topic in the next half hour. Then we'll bring Scott Lauber in. We'll deviate again at 4:06. But again, Mike is scheduled to meet with his current team at VCU at 4 o'clock, and then the compensation committee at Penn State is scheduled to meet at 4:30. And it looks like, based on reports, it is a 7-year deal. We'll come back with more in a moment. Matt Catrillo has a lifetime deal. Not surprised. The rant of the day solidified that. We'll eventually get to that in the last half hour as we continue on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
There's something to be said about a sale with a handshake, a service technician who really knows what he's doing. They can explain it in English what the problem is. There's nothing better than having that friend you could trust in the area. That's Sunbury Motors, where you get selection, knowledgeable salespeople, and prices that fit your budget, and more important, that friend you can trust. Welcome to Sunbury Motors, Kia, Ford, and Hyundai. You could shop other dealers and compare prices, but at Sunbury Motors, you get their lowest price promise. They research the current used vehicle market and guarantee their used car prices are the lowest. If you find a lower price, Sunbury Motors will beat it. 3 dealers all in one. See their full new and pre-owned inventory at sunburymotors.com. Pick out a vehicle you like and schedule your test drive online. Follow them on Facebook. Sunbury Motors Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
I'm getting complaints, by the way, that we have to wait so long for your rant.
That's all right. For good reason today.
Why? This is going to be another blaze of glory?
Well, yeah, but we got some very good guests here that are going to take that spot, which is totally fine with me, as they should.
Just saying. All I know is that every time I turn around, the Bitterness Cafe is serving burnt burgers that aren't cooked in the middle. All right, let's bring in our good friend Tommy McCarthy, just off the NCAA tournament, swinging back into the Phillies. Welcome, T-Mac. Great to have you back.
Steve, Crucker and I just had some really good burgers here in Texas downstairs for lunch. So just
beautiful.
So you know.
Oh, that's and probably fully cooked, and probably the staff was friendly.
Well, they were very friendly, very friendly. I think John got more French fries than I did, which at this point is good because he's much thinner than I am right now. So,
I gotta ask you about the NCAA tournament because you started out with the first 4 and had some pretty good games there, and then moved over to Westwood and did radio. What really struck you about this tournament as you watched it play out, and you had an opportunity to talk to some of the players and coaches involved in it?
Well, I think parity more than anything else. I think that the extra year because of COVID meant that there were certain schools like FDU that got these transfers from Division II and Division III that actually had a really big impact. But I also think you saw teams that have been together for so long that were able to figure out 1 through 5 what each other was doing. So that, to me, was the biggest thing. Parity, the impact of Division II and Division III players all across the board. You know, you guys are, I guess, nearing the addition of Mike Rhoades, who had a Division III kid who went to Hartford who had impact at VCU this year in David Shriver. So I noticed that more in the NCAA tournament. And I thought it was good for college basketball. I think that's why you have 4 non-Power 5 schools that are in the NCAA tournament. Although I guess you have to put Miami in a Power 5 school.
Yeah. But you know what's interesting? I mean, the kid from Hartford, that's because they yanked the program out from underneath them. They went from the NCAA tournament 2 years ago and a month later. And by the way, John Gallagher is going to be the new head coach at Manhattan. So good for John.
Yeah. It's good for him.
Yeah, it's great for him. And by the way, Dave Paulson, the former Bucknell head coach, is going to be the new head coach of Holy Cross.
You know what's funny? I was talking to Dave. I saw him a lot this year because he was working with Fordham. So I saw Fordham in the A-10 tournament, and I saw him in the regular season. Yeah, he told me this will be his 15th different house that he has moved into.
Oh.
Isn't that amazing?
That's unreal. Oh, my goodness. Well, that's what somebody was saying to me, with Mike Rhoades coming in here. They said, what is it for you? I said, that's the 8th different basketball coach that I've had. You had a good one, this last one. I don't know how much you know about Mike, but he's a good friend of mine. He's a
hell of a coach. He did a lot of great things at LVC as a player, Lebanon Valley, and then went to coach at Division III. The story. I don't know if you know the story or not. If you've told this or not. So he sees Shaka Smart get hired at VCU, and he gets in his car from Randolph-Macon, and he drives to VCU, and he basically drops his resume off right at Shaka's desk. That's how he got the assistant coach's job at VCU, and that's where they sort of got their friendship going. It's a good hire for Penn State. I mean, it really is. It's a really good hire.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to end up being a terrific hire. And not only that, when you're talking about what potentially sounds like a 7-year deal, that shows there's a long-term commitment to make it work, which I think is really important. I got to ask you about the Phillies now. Here they are. It's about getting ready to break camp. There'll be no Bryce Harper for a while, but what's the general impression you get of the team?
It's funny, John. I was saying Johnny and I were having lunch today, and he hasn't been on the road in a couple of years because of COVID and because of his health last year. He just did home games, and he was on the charter yesterday from Florida. I came right from Philadelphia this morning, and he said to me, he said, there is a noticeable change in this team from the last time I traveled. And I said, oh, yeah, Johnny. I said, it's totally different. He goes, totally different, totally professional. He goes, I just think that they are primed to do something special this year, despite the injuries that they have. I mean, they have injuries too. I mean, Harper obviously is one. Reese Hoskins is having surgery tomorrow in his knee down here in the Dallas area. Ranger Suarez isn't healthy yet, but I think it's as optimistic I have felt for a Phillies team in quite a long time.
How do you think they will end up filling the first base void with Hoskins no longer available for the year?
Well, I think it's going to be Derek Hall his job to lose to start. I do think, I think yesterday we saw Bohm play first base. I think you'll see him play a little first base. I think JT will play some first base. I think JK will play some first base. But I think initially, I think it's Derek Hall's position to try to win. And, the kid's in great shape, and he's a pretty good defender. And I think that he's primed for this opportunity.
One of the keys, at least to me, and you can tell me I'm wrong, when teams come together in this particular era, what's your bullpen like to get you through innings 6 through 8? And some of those guys had to have either career years or one of their better years to do it. How do you look at the Phillies innings 6 through 8 right now?
Well, I think it's going to be a toss-up 8 and 9, but I think 6 and 7. I guess it's going to be a matchup more than anything else. I mean, the fact that Strom's in the rotation now means that Vasquez, a veteran left-hander, makes the team. But I think Sir Anthony, Craig Kimbrell, guys like that will be the back end of the bullpen closing. Jose Alvarado, Gregory Soto. I think one of those four, depending on the matchups, will be 7, 8, 9. I mean, and it could be 6, 7, and 8. It depends on the matchup more than anything else. I don't think Rob is going to settle on one closer to start the year. Now, if somebody gets hot, he may do it, but I don't think he's going to settle on one closer. He is a big believer in roles and people understanding roles, but I think he's also a big believer that this group can handle the lack of consistency in a specific role. So that's my theory going in. Now, again, it could change if somebody gets hot. I do know they want to try to get Kimbrel his 400th save, but that obviously will take some time to sort of work its way out too.
Tommy, when you've talked to some of the people, or when John has talked to some people, is there anybody down in Clearwater when they were down there, maybe they were hoping would take the next step forward, that is quietly in their own way taking the next step forward, and they're going to help the team maybe more than some people realize?
Well, I've said this whole spring, Steve, that it's Alec Bohm. I really think that he's made that transition. I mean, he had a good year last year, but I think he's made that transition to have an even better year. And I think defensively and offensively. So I've talked about him often, and I think that I would stay with him even for this conversation, that he, that he's going to have the most impact. Now, with that said, if Derek Hall is successful, then they're okay at first base. Mm-hmm. So I can see it in his eyes that this opportunity is not going to be too big for him, and I think that's a really good thing for this organization.
What can Trey Turner mean to this team now that he's the everyday shortstop?
Oh, I think everything, because I think that he could steal 70 bases or 80 bases. I think you've already seen what he's done offensively, and I believe that will carry over to this season as well. And I just think that he gives them something other than a blaster. So last year when they get into these ruts, which they would get into the ruts, they didn't have somebody that can kind of hit their way out of it and use speed to manufacture. They have that now. And I think defensively, to me, he was the best available defensive shortstop on the market, and Fangraphs, I think, backs that up. So I think that that's where his impact is going to be really felt, is the ability to go from hole to the middle like Jimmy Rollins used to go.
Finally, any initial thoughts on the new rules?
I still don't like the 3-batter rule for the pitcher. I'm okay with the other ones.
Yep.
That's the one that I wish would go away. We were just on a Zoom. I wasn't on it for the whole time because I had other commitments, but we were just on a Zoom with Major League Baseball. There's still some kinks that they're working out. I do like them, though. I like the pace of the game. I like the energy of the game. To get rid of the 3-batter rule. I mean, that's the only thing. But the other ones I'm totally fine with at this point.
Total agreement there. I would like to see the 3-batter rule go away. I think that's...
Yeah, because, I mean, you're speeding up the game now anyway, so you don't really need that. You can give that strategy back to the pitchers, to the managers.
Exactly right. I'm going to let you go. Appreciate the time. I know you jumped on with us late. It means a lot.
You got it, buddy.
Thanks. Tommy McCarthy joining us from Texas, as a matter of fact. John Sauber next half hour. We'll talk about the hiring of Mike Rhoades to be the next basketball coach at Penn State. We'll get into that with him, and then Scott Lauber with more on the Phillies, and then the Matt rant, which is I'm sensing this one's going to be
it'll be another good one today.
It'll be really out.
And it'll be against somebody who I've ripped commonly as well.
I see. Anybody you want fired, or?
No, it's just the same old things that I've kind of ranted about before that will be kind of reinforced here.
Do you feel like getting this off your chest on a daily basis is prolonging your life, or the fact that it has to fester for 22 hours is taking years off?
I think there's definitely more positive than negative, because I'm at least getting it out there.
Do you wake up angry?
It depends on the day.
Okay. All right, so we'll take a break. I guess we're into the news break right here, right now. So we'll do that. We'll come back, John Sauber, in a moment. So we continue on News Radio 1070 WKOK, brought to you by Sunbury Motors.
Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
I just sent you Steven.
Oh, it's pretty close to this one particular issue I'm going to talk about today.
I feel like we're just building. I feel like I'm talking to a volcano. All right, so...
Just call me Mount Vesuvius.
Mount Catrillois. All right, let's get to today's show, brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 to 15, Hummel's Wharf, online, sunburymotors.com. All right. Let's bring in John Sauber, Sunday Daily Times. Always does a great job covering the team and has done a great job covering the story. John, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Steve. I appreciate it.
John, what is your impression, number one, of the hire of Mike Rhoades, but also the fact that it looks like it's a 7-year deal and the commitment to that?
Yeah, I think, first, on the hire itself, it's interesting, right? I think the thought process probably among the fan base was that they wanted to swing higher. I don't think there's anything wrong with hiring Mike Rhoades, especially we've seen in the past when Penn State isn't as committed to men's basketball, right? I think offering over $3 million a year is a proof of that commitment on some level to Rhoades. I think, he consistently got VCU to the NCAA tournament, consistently had really good defenses. It's definitely going to be a change-up from how we watched Mike Shrewsbury's teams play the last 2 years, and we can dive a little deeper into that later. But it is one of those things where I think he is going to get Penn State to a place where it's consistently in the NCAA tournament. And I know there may have been some aspirations to swing higher, given I think the trajectory that Shrewsbury was on. But I think Rhoades is a good coach, and I think again this is a program that has not had a ton of success. I think getting to the NCAA tournament consistently is a good step forward. And I think there's room for growth, too, especially if, maybe with a little bit more of talent base to recruit to, or to recruit from, I should say. Maybe Rhoades can get some better offenses to State College than he did, down at VCU. As far as the length of the deal, I think, maybe we'll have to wait and see if the buyout numbers come out, more importantly. But I think it's proof of commitment, again, to the program and maybe not wanting to get burned potentially by, Rhoades wanting to leave in 2 years, 3 years, whatever that may be.
Which really he hasn't done. I mean, that's not been the pattern of his career anyway.
Right.
I mean, this is a case where I think he was getting somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.7 at VCU, which is a terrific number, but he's going to get more money here.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it's just my general impression, John. You can tell me if I'm wrong about this. Sometimes I feel like the number you put in a contract for a coach can be an indicator of the commitment to the program. Do you think that plays a role here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that number means a lot. I think just as importantly, the investment in the program in other areas means a lot. That was something Pat Kraft mentioned in December when I asked him about their commitment to men's basketball. And the ability to retain Mike Shrewsbury. And, while they didn't retain Shrewsbury, they do look like they're going to put money into the program, whether that's facilities upgrades, whether that's assistant salary pool, whether it's creating positions that can help with areas like NIL and things like that. I think there's proof here that, maybe $3 million isn't the number that we should pay attention to. I do think it matters, but it's the other investment, and I think the $3 million is an indicator of that investment.
If this were to have happened 5 years ago, there'd be a world of hurt because of roster construction. To me, the toughest part of the year for a football coach is the 8 to 10 weeks after the last regular season game. The toughest period for a basketball coach is the 8 to 10 week period following the last game of their tournament. We're in that period right now. What can the transfer portal mean to Mike Rhoades and to Penn State to get things started off at least on the right foot in the right direction?
I think it means absolutely everything, right? This is not the time of year to find high school recruits. I'm sure that he will put the effort in to try and, potentially retain Kerry Booth, to potentially retain Logan Imes. I think it's pretty clear-cut that Braden Shrewsbury is going to go with his dad to Notre Dame, as we would expect. But I think, even if he doesn't get Imes and Booth, that's kind of the limit of I think what Rhoades can do from a high school cycle standpoint, right? It's just kind of so late in the game that it's really tough to get guys in at this time. So you're really relying on the portal for everything. And I'll be really interested to see, because right now we know that there are 3 players on scholarship that are not in the portal, right? It's Demetrius Lilly, it's Kebajai, and it's Kanye Clary. And we can't be 100% certain that they won't enter. I'm not saying they will, but, they have time to make that decision as well. And so we'll stick with that number of 3 for now. That means you have 10 other scholarships to fill. And I think, it will be interesting to see the players that Rhoades targets. I think there should be a mix of, trying to find some of those freshmen and sophomores that maybe things didn't go well at the program they signed with, and trying to get some of those guys in that you can use as more building blocks, while also getting starter level and, hopefully for their sake, star level players that can really lead a team to do well this year, because otherwise this could, year one could be really rocky. I would assume that Rhoades will get enough guys to make this a competitive team in the Big Ten. Now, obviously, we have to wait to see who those guys are to determine just how competitive they are. I think the fatalistic, like the program's getting buried here, is just kind of incorrect because of the way the portal works. But I do think he is, going to have to prove himself quickly in how he can recruit the portal.
Which then brings the next part. I mentioned earlier, I thought when Rich Rodriguez took the Michigan job, he had a better shot, and I'm not a Rich Rodriguez fan, but he had a better shot at some success at Michigan if he were able to bring his quarterback, Pat White, with him from West Virginia. Well, today he could have. Instead of having Ryan Mallett run that offense, he could have had Pat White. That means a coach moving from point A to point B. What are your thoughts on players on the current roster saying, I want to stick with him?
Yeah, I think that's the place that, I think it has to start, right? If those guys enter the portal and he's allowed to contact them, obviously the rules there are what they are, but sure. Ace Baldwin is the kind of guy at VCU. He was the A-10 player of the year, the A-10 defensive player of the year. Again, not the kind of guard I think that we would have seen play for Micah Shrewsbury, but the kind of guard that excels under Rhoades and can be a star under Rhoades and has been a star under Rhoades. I would start there. I think Jameer Watkins is the type of wing player that Rhoades obviously really likes, recruited him there and had a ton of success with him there. And I think guys like Jaden Nunn, who can really shoot the ball, are going to be important too, because spacing is going to be really important. I mean, in any offense, but especially this one where, maybe Baldwin is an all right but not great shooter and Watkins is an all right but not great shooter. I think you need those floor spacers, but I think this really all starts with Baldwin and Watkins. And, if those guys decide to follow Rhoades to Penn State, I think that changes everything, because they're both that level of player that, they were 2 of the best players, and Baldwin was the best player on an NCAA tournament team this year. And I don't think there's any reason to believe they couldn't be next year. Now, it'll depend on how they fill in around them, but that is a heck of a start if those guys decide they want to follow Rhoades to Penn State.
Yeah, they were younger, but you and I saw them play against Penn State 2 years ago. Yep. We were going to see them play last year in Richmond, but it was Penn State that got COVID, and that game was not made up. So it's not like some of these guys. And when I say you and I have seen them before, that's because at the point we saw them, fans were limited in the Jordan Center. That's why the fans didn't see them.
Yep. And and that was also, if you remember, that VCU team had Bones Highland, who's now with the Clippers and had a lot of success with the Nuggets. And, there's some proof of concept there with development from Mike Rhoades. I think that is, you're seeing it with Baldwin and Watkins. You saw it with Bones Highland. And I think that's something that he's going to kind of have to hang his hat on early, right? You want to get the talent in right away, but he needs to get the base of guys in. We talked about this with Micah Shrewsbury, I think, before, too. You need to get your guys in. You need to get that first group of guys in to be that core, and you got to really develop them, because then they're going to be the key piece, to your first, the idealized version of your team, if you will, right? Like the first group of guys that I think we'll be able to look at with Mike Rhoades at Penn State and say, this is his team, is the one that's in like 2025 when his first freshman class is sophomores and juniors, and they're able to really get something going. Until then, I think he's got to kind of, maybe bring some of the culture from VCU if he can get some of those guys, but kind of fit pieces in around them and work it slowly until he gets his first group of guys and they can really be, integrated into his culture and be exactly who he wants them to be.
The 1-2-1-1 full court press, which he has employed many times there, has been critical. I mean, he has the ability to coach a team that will get offense from his defense. How important is that element, especially when you're in the formative years of a program?
Oh, I think it's crucial, right? Getting that part in, because there's a reason they call it the havoc defense, right? It is just creating chaos and creating havoc for offenses, and they're trying to turn you over constantly, and they're trying to create chaos. And I think, having what could be a young program, again, it's tough to say without knowing who exactly is going to be there, but assuming a young program that doesn't know each other that well, creating chaos can be a good thing. And I think it's going to be really disruptive, especially in the Big Ten, the 1-2-1-1. Teams aren't used to seeing stuff like that. Big Ten teams don't necessarily have 2 or 3 ball handlers on the court at once. Sometimes teams only have one. So I think a press can be really effective in the Big Ten. So I think we could see, if he gets the kind of guys he wants in early, they could be really, really good defensively. The offensive end will have to come around, and like I said, I think the biggest thing is going to be improving on offense for Mike Rhoades. His teams have generally been middle of the pack in Division I, but I think there is a baseline there that he can create, and implementing that 1-2-1-1 is kind of how he does that.
They were, by the way, just so everybody knows, in the Ken Pom numbers, this particular version of VCU that made the NCAA tournament, winning the Atlantic 10, was 145 in offensive efficiency, but 15 in defensive efficiency in the Ken Pom numbers this year. Just so everybody knows along the line. Penn State basketball. That's been the trend too. If you look at his 5 years there, they've all been kind of around those numbers on both ends of the court. Yeah, no, exactly right, John. I mean, Penn State will support a winner in basketball. I firmly believe that, and it was shown by the last game they played. Now, you're talking about brand name Texas, brand name NCAA tournament, but also, let's face it, that's still Penn State across the front of the jersey. John, it got 6.6 million viewers on CBS. It was the 6th highest rated TV show for the week.
Yeah, it was also incredible basketball, right? I think that always helps. And there's a level of excitement with the way that Micah Shrewsbury had his team played because of the offense. And I think this is going to be the inverted version of that, right? The defense is going to bring excitement, and that chaos will be fun to watch for people. And, maybe the offense can be frustrating at times, but the defense will be an appealing brand of defense that I think draws people out. And, it should be good enough to draw crowds, and I think should draw people to the Bryce Jordan Center. It's always a mystery kind of to what extent, because you never know, in the doldrums of December what it's going to look like. But I do think, Big Ten play comes around, there's no reason to believe that he isn't able to get a good-sized crowds in there and get the support that he needs, because he is going to need it. We've all heard the talk about NIL and everything. Basketball needs that kind of support, right, to be what I think fans want it to be. And make no mistake about it, this team, you said supporting a winner, they can be a real winner too, right? Like, they could be consistent NCAA tournament team who makes a run to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four down the road with the right amount of support, because basketball is it doesn't require the same financial funding as football. You can kind of decide to be good at basketball if you have the funding and put the resources into it, and you can be good. And I think this hire is probably the start of the intent to do that for Penn State. Interesting times.
He will meet with his current team at VCU in about 12 minutes or so, and then the compensation committee will meet at 4:30, and then we'll find out tomorrow when everybody gets to meet him. So, John, thanks so much.
I think something to look forward to now.
Yeah, I mean, look, you needed after a week. At some point, you knew they were going to get a rudder. They have it now. So, time to steer the ship.
Yep.
John, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Steve. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you very much. I know we'll talk to Steve Mechanicsburg in a moment. We'll do that after the break, if that's okay with Steve. Sounds like it is. Is it okay with him, or are you going to get angry?
No, we're good. We're good.
Just want to make sure. Because I think you're ready to just explode on me any day now.
Never.
Here on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Let's get to Steve Mechanicsburg. Steve, I apologize for the wait. Thank you for your patience.
Hey, no, Steve, I appreciate you having me on.
Okay. So what's on your mind, my friend?
So I actually wanted to talk about Mike Rhoades' hire and the Micah Shrewsbury exit. So I had an opportunity last year. I worked at Penn State, and I worked in their athletics department up there in State College. And I had an opportunity to meet multiple coaches there, and the coach that impressed me the most was always Micah Shrewsbury. Being a player's coach, just being a guy that you just want to be around. And Mike Rhoades is a guy that I have heard a little bit about prior to the announcement of his hire. Being a Duke fan, I don't really focus too much on other schools, but I have a friend that is actually the director of player development at VCU, Clay Connor. He played at Shippensburg University.
Sure.
And I reached out to him and just talked to him a little bit and just had a couple of questions about the kind of person that Mike Rhoades is and the alarming similarities between the two of Micah Shrewsbury and Mike Rhoades. It just almost sounded like they were describing the same guy, personality-wise. And
I've only been around Mike once. I'm sorry, I've only been around Mike once, and that was when they came in here, and we weren't doing the 6 foot thing, okay?
Right.
Sorry, it's just, I'm more realistic about life, and that's the impression I got. He's a terrific guy, so that's at least a great start.
Well, and the other thing that this hire does show that I've heard you mention multiple times on the show today is the commitment that Penn State has made. So in 2020, when Pat Chambers exited Penn State, his salary was roughly like $1.2 million. And that was well below the standard in like the average in NCAA D1 that year. The average salary was like 2.2, I believe, amongst like a lot of the top schools. And so to see them go out and offer Mike Rhoades, a guy who's from, I think it's Monomoy City, Pennsylvania, a guy who had took Randolph-Macon to 3 ODAC championships, a guy who went to Rice and by his third year had an 11-win improvement, a guy who came back to, then was an assistant at VCU prior to Rice, goes to Rice, then back to VCU, and they had, 2 of their first NBA draft picks. So just to see them continue to chase that success, because they haven't been a basketball school. I was up there for 8 months, and I had an absolutely amazing time working there. But one thing, being a Penn State fan, bleeding blue and white, 13 members of my family were in the blue band. Being a Penn State fan and a diehard blue and white bleeder, it's been disappointing to see the success that we've had in every other aspect of our athletic department. And then it just kind of seemed like basketball was kind of that redheaded stepchild that just kind of was there.
There's no question that over time, basketball's been making money. Now, look, it's all because of the confluence of factors, including the media deals and things like that. Right? I always laugh when I hear, well, it's only because of the media deal. What, you don't want the media deal? I'm sorry. That's why I look at people like, you don't want the media deal? What? It's all part of it. They played 37 games this year, 34 on TV. I think they deserve the media deal.
Right?
I always laugh about that. I look at people like, what is wrong with you? It's like,
well,
so
I think
it makes money. You don't want it to make money? It's helping out.
Exactly. What I had a question for you, though, Steve, and I wanted to find out, recently in the last few years, Penn State has made it a big push to retain these coaches that they've had. Unfortunately, Micah, I had a feeling that Penn State being, it was almost like a stepping stone to get back to, and I hate to say this, I know he's an Indiana guy. He played at, Hanover. Played at a college, Hanover College in Indiana, and, he's from Indiana. The hire at Notre Dame makes sense. Mike Rhoades being a guy from PA, yes, it makes sense. Kind of a similar situation with James Franklin when we hired him. He was kind of a coming home, welcome home thing too. Do you see the length of the deal? Yes, they finally went out $3 million. That would actually put him in kind of the upper echelon of the paid coaches in the NCAA. What do you think about that length of the deal, that 7 years, $3 million a year, $25 million total? Do you think it's too long in today's basketball?
if it hadn't been for the commitment financially and the length of the deal, I think he would have stayed at VCU. Because I think he's in other words, the length of the deal combined with the money, I think made a big difference to him. Right? There's a commitment and there's a financial commitment. So there's a length of contract commitment and a financial commitment. I think that made a big deal to him. So I think that if things go well here, he has staying power. He'll stay here. He's a Pennsylvania guy. He grew up in Central PA in Schuylkill County. I think there's some staying power to it.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm really excited to see what he does. I think, the last guest you had on the show mentioned his ability to consistently get VCU into that NCAA tournament. I don't see that changing. Moving to Penn State, they have the school to bring in the recruits. They have the facilities to bring in the recruits. And now they brought in another guy similar to Micah Shrewsbury with the same amount of success. And I think that this is a perfect match for Penn State, and I'm really excited for the future of their basketball program.
Steve, thanks so much. Great comments. I enjoyed it.